Geography and You presents.
Hello and welcome back to a brand new series brought to you by GNY Live podcast series The Blue Deal, where we dive deep into the emerging issues in the ocean. I'm your host Hiteshika, and in today's episode we dive into the vast and often overlooked world of India's maritime future. India's oceans have remained on the periphery of mainstream discussions, but the sea holds the key to India's sustainable growth, economic expansion, and strategic leadership. To help us navigate this ocean of opportunity, we have a very special guest today, Dr. Malini Shankar, a trailblazer in the maritime world and the driving force behind India's maritime policy reforms. She is the Vice Chancellor of India's Maritime University. Alongside her, we have Dr. Shulagna Chattopadhyay, our discussant and editor in chief of Geography and You, who will steer us through the important questions that shape India's blue economy aspirations. As we cast off the shore, we hope this conversation helps all of us better understand why the ocean matters and how India can lead with both purpose and foresight in its blue ambitions. With that, I hand over the discussion to Dr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiteshika. Very warm welcome, Dr. Malini.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on today's podcast.
Dr. Malini, today we are keen to talk about better capacities in maritime sector and how that's going to help the blue economy actually. Now we learn that there are new areas like marine biotech. Then there are things like sustainable maritime logistics and blue accounting. Now these require certain some more skills than we currently have. So I want to know from you as the VC of IMU that what are these new courses about and whether, for example, the new education policy, whether that would provide a certain fillip to say private universities, and what has been your experience with your affiliated and other private universities regarding these kind of new courses.
Okay. I will first, share the basics of what the Indian Maritime University is all about. It was established in 2008 uh, to enable seafarers to obtain degrees so that it expands their opportunity for shore jobs once they decide to step off the ship. So the genesis lays in about 6 or 7 societies and trusts which had been established or colleges for training seafarers to go on board the ships. Our focus has been on education in marine engineering, nautical science, naval architecture and ocean engineering, shipbuilding on the technical side. And on the managerial side, we have specialized courses which look at blue economy, parts of it, ship and port management, international transportation, multimodal transport, logistics, retail, etc. So this is the gamut that we have. It's a specialized university, so it focuses only on sectors related to maritime so far. As a university, you know there is a difference between knowledge and skill. Knowledge is when you get those degrees and you go for higher studies and research, and skill is what, competency, right? So the seafarers who go on board ships need to be only skilled even today as per the STCW convention of the International Maritime Organization, which means that they have to show certain skills which empowers them to go on board ships. Having said that, I think the world and especially India, the NEP is driving the focus back onto skills because knowledge is equated today with exams and degrees, whereas skills is more in terms of your capability, the capacity building that you said. I might pass an exam very well, I might get a good degree, but am I skilled enough to be ready to take on a job in the industry? So the kind of courses that you mentioned, marine biotechnology, sustainable maritime logistics, blue accounting, etc., these are included in the blue economy, framework, saying these are all the courses in the future. Right now, we are attempting to see what are the courses that would be of interest to students. So one part is what we would like to share, what we would like the students and the cadets to, know about before they go on to the workforce. But there is another side. The student's interest is also equally important. So if the student finds that this is not really going to be as an asset in getting a job, they might not opt for the courses. So what is the opportunity once they do these courses? Now, this is not just limited to maritime, it's general for many sectors where you have to push certain things. For example, if I ask a student or cadet today, they will say we want AI and ML. That's the keywords that are used today. But coming back to what the university is doing, what we have done is introduce something called MCC, which is microcredit courses, which we give as optionals or electives. So these are microcredit is 15 hours of teaching, lab, tutorial, self-learning, etc., which goes to 15 hours is equal to 1 credit. So they can take this as specialized courses that can add value to their CV and to the potential jobs they would like to do, or even further studies they would like to do in the future. So this is how we are approaching it: electives and microcredit courses. As far as private universities are concerned, yes, the national or the new education policy gives the opportunity for them to delve further, wider, and deeper. Uh, Again, the issue is how do you have a fit, is align it with the requirements or the expectations of the industry. So if the industry feels blue accounting is very important, that is where they'll go. But in my opinion, sustainable maritime logistics, for example, yes, is important for the industry, because a lot of industry, they look at diversity, they look at sustainability, etc. But if you look at marine biotechnology and blue accounting, they would be mostly in the government sector, because it would go into, um, contributing to the policies of the government, the economic and scientific policies of the government. I don't know whether it answered the question
Yeah, so
sufficiently.
yes, of course. You're trying to say that there are certain niche subject areas, just the way we have fundamental science, which is limited to only a few in few universities, actually very few right now, who do
Yes,
fundamental science, and then most is like market driven and market oriented, and we have to cater to a
yes.
lot of what the market demands.
But having said that, I think there is opportunity for the student population at large and the youth in general to know that they have to look beyond just market oriented.
Yes.
And for example, oceans form more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and 97% of all water is in the oceans. And anything to do with the oceans should be helping them find certain, professions. I would not call them jobs, enter something that will be very satisfactory for them. How many of the youngsters know about jobs related to oceans
Yes.
is a big question that the experts are asking today.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
very
to the,
pertinent point, because
mm,
and that's one of the areas that we also want to address, that there are a lot of opportunities in the ocean, and the youth should be looking towards the ocean. Now, just taking this forward, like you did say that this is kind of you have a smaller amount of focus, perhaps in the governmental sectors, primarily for things like blue accounting. But has India really arrived at any definition for what constitutes a blue economy? So suppose I have to, I have to bring out a number that it is contributing to X percentage of India's GDP. So how would I do that?
yeah, I think the RIS, the Research Information Systems, which is a wing of the Ministry of External Affairs, did bring out a compendium on this particular topic of what contributes to it. But they also share the view that it's so vast that just about everything contributes to it. So if we are saying that 70% of the Earth's crust is oceans, I suppose that our focus has been on land, mostly on land, then on air now. But if once it goes back to the oceans, that's where the blue accounting comes in. a lot of opportunity to look at it, but you have to take it sector by sector to see how much is accounted for. But before the accounting itself, we have to know what are the resources. So if you look at blue economy, what is the general, what can be the definition? It is how do you use the resources in the ocean to contribute to your economy, with the caveat that it has to also be environmentally sensitive and sustainable. So if you look at fishing, for example, which most people would understand, it's a livelihood of, I think, most of the coastal states in India and coastal areas of the world. But if you don't do sustainable fishing, there are areas already where you have the fish have run out, or you have to go farther and farther into
Yeah.
the seas, or you get less and
Yeah,
less
effort,
fish, or
fishing
less and
effort.
less quality fish,
Yeah.
which in fact leads to conflicts in the ocean. That it goes up to between nations, it could go up to that level, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to study just fishing and say what is the natural fishing resources available in the ocean? How long will they last if you, and so what should your, what should the approach be in fishing? Should you be encouraging trawling? Should you encouraging cage fishing?
Yeah.
Those kind of policies come in. So there is no one definition you can give. You'll have to look at each sector and see how it can be, how the seas can be exploited, but in a more sustainable fashion.
So moving on, actually, that gives me a clue really that we have this September 2022 draft policy
Draft.
for the blue economy. Now, there are seven pillars, or seven what they call the priority areas, and you mentioned fishing. Now,
Yeah.
and fishing is it's such a livelihood. It's like co-joined with so many other things that it brings me to your idea about sustainability, because you've written fairly, you know. You've written a lot on sustainability. So I wanted to know that you have studied this document.
See, for example, there's a lot of talk on exploiting the resources in the sea, not limited to fishing. Let's look at nodules. Let's look at chemicals which are in the sea, which have to be extracted. But the first thing now in the 21st century is you first have to address the environmental concerns before you address the scientific exploitation.
Absolutely.
We do have the technology. There are national institutions and increasingly even private institutions which will have the technology. But if we start today in going and just, extracting it, you might find reservations and conflicts. So we will have to address the environmental concerns. We have to actually have an approach, have a method to address it. There could be, or there's a range of environmental concerns that they might have. For example, the International Seabed Authority has given India 70,000 square
Indian
kilometers of space
Ocean.
for exploitation. We have the technology. So the two things that are required to get into this, one is the legal framework, the national laws which will enable it, which will be in alignment with the international laws. But a more important second one is you may have the law and the technology in place, but you will have to address the social dynamics. So that's what I meant about, environmental sustainability. Uh, Another thing is, for example, tourism. There's a lot of
Yeah,
tourism.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
ocean
yeah, yeah,
tourism.
yeah.
There's cruise. For example, when I went to Andamans, and you go by ship from Port Blair to this small little place from where you take a small boat to go and see the mud volcano, which is a really great natural phenomenon. But the last few minutes that you go into that mud volcano, there are these little boats, six-seater boats, which are sputtering, smoke.
Yes.
Um, it's
And they are
diesel or
diesel.
kerosene
Yeah,
mixed with
it's
diesel,
diesel. Yeah, yeah.
So it is good to have this tourism, but can we look at those boats being solarized, or using renewable energy, because it's just short distances. Okay, high sea travel, there's a lot of research going on. The International Maritime Organization is looking at saying you have to cut out the greenhouse gases by so much by 2030 and fully by 2050. They're committed to that. Recently, they have actually, the countries have voted for it. But what about these small boats which run for tourism? The other thing is, other aspect, coming back to fisheries, is the boats that they use. Again, they don't use clean fuel. And I understand from the interactions I've had with other countries that many countries, including countries like Japan and Thailand, face a similar problem of the coastal fishing boats creating pollution. So is it sustainable? And the fishermen live on the coast, so the coastal communities get affected. How do we address this? That would be a focus for sustainable blue economy also.
Yeah, so just taking from there, you've done a CC Marpol. I mean, you have,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes,
in 2024, last year,
yes.
you've organized that.
Yes,
Yeah. And
yes.
so if you can tell us, like, in a sense, like, this is a very burning issue. And I mean, the fact that emission is, the Indian Ocean is the most populous in terms of traffic. I mean, not all of it comes to India, of course,
Yes,
but there's a lot of
correct.
traffic that passes through the Malacca, through the Suez, and all around the African countries, and of course, some of it comes to India. So now this entire area, which is now laden with emission issues, and the fact that we need to change the SMO and we need to get in different fuels. Where is India in this? What is your view?
So India is always, as you know, if you look at the COP26, COP27, and what India is committed, I think the Honorable Prime Minister, he has actually shared that India will become, will go into renewable energy and reduce all the pollutants by 2070. When it comes to shipping, the International Maritime Organization has clearly said that yes, we have to remove the greenhouse gases by the year 2050. And that's what I said. The MEPC committee, which met this month, has agreed to actually look at trading, a hybrid model where you actually make the polluters pay
Yeah.
to keep it short, right? So all this will definitely go towards reducing the emission of greenhouse gases. But what I feel is this is addressing just the air pollution because the greenhouse gases are emitted into the air. Are we looking closely enough at the water pollution?
Yeah, that
What are
is
we
an
letting
yeah,
into the
yeah,
water?
absolutely.
That part, it doesn't look like the IMO is because they're looking at the high seas, which is thousands of nautical miles away from the coast. But this is why when we did that international conference, we called it CC Marpol because CC stands for coastal communities. So Marpol it always gets the focus from the international organizations right down to the national, like Director General of Shipping, but the coastal community part gets left out. So, for example, in the Maritime University, in our own university, we have taken up a project which will be implemented in the Vishakhapatnam coast. It's a pilot project to look at pollution index in the port and harbor area. So this pollution index will be a composite of what is a pollution, air pollution, as well as what is a water
Water
pollution.
pollution also.
Yeah. Once we do this pilot project and we can emulate it in one or two other ports, I think we will that will be the capacity building for us to understand how much of pollution is taking place on our coast and are there ways of mitigating or eliminating it. Even more than mitigating and eliminating, I think personally, we need to sensitize the communities so that they get involved, they ask for it, because in a democracy, you get what you ask for.
Yeah, correct.
So
Oh,
you have to ask for it. But given that India is very proactive, the government of India is very proactive when it comes to clean air and clean water. But when it goes down to the brass tacks, the ground level, I think the people they have to be involved. They have to be part of the entire movement.
okay, I just want to take it there. Like, you talked about people and you talked about communities. Now, the Secretary of Ministry of Ports and Shipping and Waterways, talks about India becoming at the top, 10 shipbuilding nations. Now, right now we are 22nd. And by 2030, we envisage to become the top 10 and top 5 by 2047. So, shipbuilding is a very, very difficult proposition, if I may say so, because we hardly have, apart from Cochin, which is, I think, one of the best facilities for shipbuilding. Uh, Most of, you have to tell us this relationship between dry docks and the fact that JNPT do not have dry docks. I mean, what is the ramific? I mean, how does it? What are the ramifications for um, ports having facilities for repair and shipbuilding facilities as well? The fact that we don't really have this across the ports that we have, does it? I mean, this vision of being the top in the top 10 and in the top 5. How challenging is it?
Yeah, it has been challenging going by the experience of the last 10 years when incentives or initiatives have not really spurred the growth as much as we expected. This is a shame, really, because if you look at 1,000 years ago, India was a top shipbuilding nation, right?
Yeah.
And there were both, there were very, very many reasons why we started gliding, not the least of it, policy by colonizers, right? So we are trying to catch up, and this catch up game is, there are several hindrances. Now, there are other countries which have caught up much faster, China, Korea, Japan, to name a few. Ships are no longer built in England, like even 200 years ago, 100 years ago. Most of them are built in Asia, in fact. Now, I will dry docks are necessary, yes, but I think during my interaction with the industry stakeholders, I find what are the challenges for shipbuilding. There is Cochin Shipyard, there's Hindustan Shipyard. Cochin Shipyard is partnering the Kolkata dock. There's several initiatives that are going, but number one is financing. I think the finance sector has to understand what shipbuilding is about, finance and insurance sector, because they do not, if you look at a ship like you look at financing a car or you financing a house, it's going to be difficult to understand. So this is one thing that I find, financing, you have to not only understand what it is about, you have to understand the risk analysis. Risk study has to be done. You have to understand that it takes a long time to build a ship. It's not even like a house, which still takes a long time, but you know what it is, right? um, the second thing that is the dependence of India on, main components. We are dependent on other countries, maybe Europe, maybe Japan. For example, the propellers. We don't make, we do make a lot of things. It's not that we don't make, our auto industry is very good and almost self-dependent. But the propellers are really a specialized part. We don't make it. We depend on another country to, send it to us. And there could be delays, there could be issues there. And the other parts, our industries are not manufacturing those parts. So we are still dependent on imports. Now, why are the industries not manufacturing those parts? If you look at an aircraft or you look at the automobile industry, there is a certain type of aircraft. There's maybe 5 or 6 types of aircraft. There's a template. Automobiles, you might have 50 models, but there are templates for these 50. In shipping, each ship is different plan. It's got a There is no model for shipping. It depends on the company which is ordering for a ship to be built. The company might say, and there are very many categories of ships. There are ships which carry tankers, which carry oil, fuel, etc. There are bulk carriers which carry coal, minerals, etc. Then there are other mixed breeds. So even a company which wants a ship will not order 3 tankers. It will order, I want a tanker, I want a bulk carrier, I want something else. And each company also gives the specifications. Okay. So each built is what they call in the ship. Each ship that is constructed is unique and custom made.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That that's why, and at the most you can have 2 or 3 ships having the same thing. And it's also and it's very, you're not, the company will not allow you to share it with others. And the ship design has to pass through various iterative actions to finally get the design. Now, these ship designs are mostly done by European companies. Okay. Um, most of the European companies employ a huge number of Indian naval architects,
Okay.
which is one of the great occupation, opportunities for people who are considering getting into naval architecture. In fact, the naval architecture seats in the university get filled up quite fast. So these are the ones, naval architects are the ones who design the ships. So once a ship is designed, then it goes into construction and the parts get into it. So it's not like automobiles where you have millions of automobiles being constructed, or even aircrafts where there are hundreds of aircrafts being ordered. It's not hundreds of ships which get ordered, and it's not a steady demand. So this is why the smaller companies don't get into manufacturing parts for the ship. What we are trying to do in our little way is to connect the shipyards to the MSMEs so that the MSMEs understand the ship construction, understand the demand, and they cater to the demand. That is how the ship construction industry will grow, by building the capacity to manufacture these parts within the country, which will give the reliability of supply of these parts. And therefore, the time for constructing the ship will be reduced. So, if you look,
I was under the impression that hulls actually is kind of manufactured by specific companies, and they have like those specifications. Like for example, I worked on Antarctic, and we have this polar research vessel that was being, requisitioned from a very long time, which hasn't, of course, come through. But the fact that the hull specifications remain over the ships. I think maybe the other parts would differ, but is it true that the hulls are specifically, there are some
see,
specifications that you
no, that could be.
manufactured?
I don't think there's a problem with the hull. I'm talking about the equipment which goes
Ah,
into the ship,
okay.
right? All the equipments can differ, the engine specifications
Can
can
differ.
differ, the container can, the contents
Ah,
of the ship can differ. Like I said, a tanker is different from
correct,
bulk
correct.
carrier, which is, etc. But even the hull, coming back to it, just as a side note, um, I just read that the bulbous hull, which is the common type, they are working, the designers are working on it to see how that can be changed so that it is made more fuel efficient, more streamlined, so that it's less resistance in the waters. So that's also a constant change.
Ha, ha.
So the bulbous hull is undergoing some reformation in recent times.
Okay, now I will take this to our final question now about, you did touch on this a little while ago, a little while before, when you talked about students wanting to do artificial intelligence and, all of these newer things in ports. Now, there is also an idea which has come from like countries are protesting, like China is of course forefront in this managing of the, so you can just perhaps little explain for our listeners a little bit that what does AI really do in a port, and the fact that there are countries that are protesting that this shouldn't be done because these huge infrastructures are prone to collapse if AI is completely like humans are completely taken out of the scenario. And apparently there has been something in China and Taiwan and US where protests have happened. So if you can just enlighten a little bit about this.
So why is AI getting into the picture, AI and ML? It's basically to ensure that there is efficiency of operations, because in the olden days, people had a lot of time. The ship would come and it can take its own time, 4 days, 5 days for it to be unloaded and loaded again, and the seafarers could just take a walk in the city, etc. With we are in the 21st century where the whole world is talking about productivity and efficiency, right? In order to make it efficient, one of the key indicators for efficiency in a port is turnaround time, right? So India has reduced this turnaround time from about 3-4 days to now, I think it's just a day or so, maybe 24 to 40 hours. And the goal is to reduce it to just 8 hours. Now, this cannot be done if you're just looking at everything manually and checking things. The port digitalization experiment and initiative is to ensure that you have enough data in your hands to, for example, what is the cargo that is coming in, because if it is a composite carrier, it could have all different types of cargo which might require different types of handling. So you have to know what is the cargo coming in, what is the amount of cargo coming in, what is the risk factor of the cargo. The reason I say risk factor is if you have some chemicals which require special dispensation of equipment of man or manpower, then you have to arrange for that. If you have all this ready in hand, then you move it in and your ship can be unloaded very, very efficiently. Number one. Number two, AI is also for improving the safety. As I said, if you have some cargo which requires some safety conditions or even general safety conditions, you know that it will trigger, it will flag where there is a gap and you have to fill it. So these are just two examples. We can go on and on. Um, you can accommodate more ships in the case in the piers, because then ship turnaround time means that you can send the ship out faster. You get a next ship. A third example of this digitalization is, can the ship tell us when it is arriving? How long does it have to stay in the outer area, the anchorage area, etc.? So this is all for basically ensuring safety and efficiency. Now, any new thing that we take up in technology wise is going to face a certain amount of resistance. Now, 30, 40 years ago, when computers entered offices, there were people in the offices who went on a pen down strike saying, we're going to lose jobs. Therefore, we will not allow computerization in this office. Now, all that turned out to be quite a myth because the jobs only increased. But what's going to happen is the kind of jobs that are on offer, the kind of professions will undergo a change. Somebody who's used to just manual operation, if you ask them to go towards digitalized operation, they have to upskill themselves, reskill themselves. So, or a certain company which has invested in a certain kind of operation will say, now we have to reinvest and that's going to cost us. So these are the resistors, I would call. But I think history has shown that there will be resistance. There will be technological developments, and there will be a time when resistance is overcome, and the same companies or the countries which are resisting will definitely adopt them very fast and
Quickly.
contribute
Yeah.
to the efficiencies of the system.
So in India, I think isn't how do you pronounce this?
Virindam, Virindam,
How do you say it?
Virindam.
Viringam.
Yeah,
Viringam.
Virindam.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Viringam International Port. I think we have some AI over there, but I think it's a private port as well.
No, it's not a completely private port, because Kerala government has actually given they have contributed, they have a stake in it, and in fact, the CMD of the Virindam port is actually an IS officer of the Kerala cadre. So government has a stake in it, but since it is a greenfield port, unlike others which are brownfield, you can introduce digitalization into an existing port. But Virindam was built bottom up. It's a greenfield port where they had the best practices of the world brought in. So they're not going to go through this process of manual to electronic, etc. They're just starting with the best of it.
Okay, so that's a good place to go and see, perhaps for your students as well, and learn from there.
Yeah, perhaps, yes.
Yeah, right. So it's been a great conversation, and there is, of course, there is some things we need to talk about also, and maybe we'll come back to you at a later
Sure.
point.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much, and
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking, and I hope that the listeners will get enthused by what's happening in the oceans, ship, ports, and waterways. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, and a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Malini Shankar for anchoring this vital conversation. From redefining the blue economy in the Indian context to spotlighting the strategic, institutional, and ecological dimensions of India's maritime journey, today's episode reminds us that ocean is not just a resource but a responsibility. And to our listeners, we are on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us so you never miss an episode. A detailed blog covering today's discussion, including key takeaways, expert perspectives, and curated resources, will be published shortly on our website www.geographynu.com. This is GNY Live, the Blue Deal. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep pushing for a sustainable and an inclusive ocean future.